Hello, hello, welcome to my research channel. And I'm trying to highlight how to write a PhD proposal. Let's start with the simple things. First thing to note is writing a PhD proposal is not a difficult thing. It's easy, but you need to focus and narrow down. Research proposal is simple, but some people assume that it is a very hard task. And research proposal is a coherent and a concise summary of your proposed research. If you follow the steps that I say, it will make your life very simple and easy. Some words can refer to a lot of hard work, such as focus and narrow down, but they can also make your research easy to complete in time. And even the task of focusing and narrowing it down can both be fun and enjoyable. Let's see how it works here. First, research means finding something new. When you are considering to engage in a research, you are either thinking that you got a new idea that is worth pursuing or proving it something new, or you want to discover something new or found something new, or assuming that the present theories or models or philosophies in that area that you want to do research lack something. So there are many things to do research on. You may find some theories not adequate to address a particular issue in your context. So how to go about from this new idea to a research proposal? That's what I'm going to share with you today. At first, we have drawn the picture of an outline, that is the proposal. Then we can do a proper research and then come up with the writing up of a dissertation. So, research refers to a search for a new knowledge. It's an art of scientific investigation. It's a movement from known to unknown. In an academic context, it is an original contribution to the existing stock of knowledge, making its advancement. First, let's try to write your idea or something that you think you might find as a new thought or a problem that you wish to address in one sentence. If you can try to write in one sentence, do not worry if this sentence is too long or too short. Don't worry if it is too vague. Even if the sentence is not clear for yourself, please do not worry. Just keep the sentence, it will help you to the next step. But only one condition, that is not to write more than one sentence. Do not try to develop it into a title now. So now we have written one sentence of the whole thinking that I am thinking as something new that I may discover or I may find. It's hard to do at this stage, but you will also develop this further later. So the next step is to write down what is in your mind in a short summary. In this summary, you can write down what is the new contribution that you are thinking of, actually expanding the sentence that you have written. What would make this new? How it will be relevant to your context or to academic context that you are thinking. What are the objectives of your research? You can put them in bullet point. What are you aiming to achieve at the end of the day? So if you can write down in 3 points the aim of this research, what are the areas that this idea touches? What is the problem or issue that this new idea tends to address or engage with? This should not be more than 100 words. A couple of sentences setting out the problem that you want to examine or central question that you want to address. That's very important for us. But before you come to this point, you also need to really look at the words that you would select regarding the research. Identify the important words. For example, recently somebody wanted to do a research on what is the perception of the churches towards disability. So this is a bit of bigger question, but then we have to narrow it down because it is in a particular country. Even within the country, we have to narrow it down to many thinking. So we had a discussion, and during the discussion, that we discover that we like to see the perceptions of a particular church within that particular country, within particular area, towards a disabled person becoming a priest. This is a very or pastor. This is a very interesting next step or narrowing it down. Now we have come to the point the church can be an Anglican church or a Pentecostal church which you belong to. So when you think of that church, then what is the kind of perception of people about a person with disability becoming a pastor? This is a real problem. But now, from the real problem, we move to research question. This is a social problem. This is not a research, simply a research question. We move from here to the research question. In the summary or abstract, it is important that you introduce broader context of the research in a few sentences. You should also introduce the broad area in which your research falls. You should take time to reflect on key questions that you try to answer in your research and then prioritize them. You can list them into primary and secondary questions. So now we are looking at this problem. Let's take this. I want to do why people are resisting differently abled people not to become clergies. But now my research question, primary question can be what are the influencing factors? I want to be kind of inductive. I want to know from the people what is their perception and what actually leads them towards that perception, and what are the existing theological perceptions in the writings before me in my particular tradition, for example, Anglican or Pentecostal or Catholic, and how much I know, how much I have read, and what are the perceptions, and how people have analyzed those theological understanding of differently abled people through the writings on the one hand, but my focus is to go to the people and ask them what are their perceptions and where these perceptions stand in the line of discussion they already have among the scholars. And this is the connection that we need to make in terms of questions. So, what are the theological thinking behind these perspectives that contribute to them, their views about differently abled people and them becoming pastors for the churches? And that's a very interesting question. We have moved to the third stage of narrowing it down. Now we go to the next point. Find who wrote with similar ideas and how you differ from them. This is a very important point where you start. First of all, we said we will write down one sentence, and then the second level, we said we will describe a short summary or abstract of my research. And then we went on to say, what are my research questions and prioritize a primary question and a secondary questions. It should not be more than three secondary questions. Primary question should be one question. But that will also keep changing. You have a one sentence, you have a paragraph of a summary, and now you have a primary question and a secondary question. Now we move on to the next level where we see how do we do a literature review to see how the theological thinking has developed through the years within your own tradition and possibly other traditions at every place globally among the scholars about the perception of disabled people in relation to the pastoral ministry. It's a very interesting question. So the next question you need to ask is, did anyone else discuss similar ideas? Or are these people whose ideas are closer to yours that but they fall short in addressing these problems or issues, or their emphasis are different, or they do not recognize some of the intrigue issues in your context? So it's first identify what are the available literature. So you need to go to the literature search, either Google Books or Outlaw, or there are many search engines that gives you, in particular, if it is a psychological area that you have, you can take the psychological studies on the publications, and there are kind of online searches. You have to pay for it, then you have to do it that way. If there is a religious studies or media studies, you go accordingly. And there are a lot of theses have been written online, and there are a lot of articles and books which you need to look at using particular words. For example, we go back to the disability. We go focus now, let's say, on Pentecostal theology. Okay, what is the Pentecostal theologies of disability? So you will do a search on Pentecostal theologies on disability or differently able people, and Pentecostal theology of pastoral ministry. And even some people might have written even Pentecostal theology of pastoral ministry and differently able people. And if you talk to your supervisor or some people who are there online, then you some people can suggest the names like Amos Young, or there are many others who have written on the same topic. And even you can see it in the Google books. There are many, many books that will be relevant to your thinking. So discussing on this specific area and idea is important. List them into primary and secondary resources, even very less relevant books and articles. It's also important. Maybe you can also start within your context, within your country, within your region, like African Pentecostal theology of pastoral ministry, African Pentecostal theology on disability, and then go and go globally. So in your search, you must be as wide as possible to make sure not none of the people are left out. But when you bring it to the narrowing down of your area, you focus and sharpen it. So reading wider, global, as much possible. Make sure you have not left anyone, any scholars in this area down, out. But at the same time, when you narrow and focus, you are sharpened to see where you are furthering the knowledge that has been already written, or even adopting one of the major theoretical thought patterns to your context. That's also easier to finish if you adopt one of the major scholar and push it a little further or make it relevant to your context and raise some questions. That itself is enough for a PhD to push it further. List them into primary and secondary categories. Then identify those ideas and arguments and methods, context, evidences, and objectives of their research publications or books or articles in a list. Then critically review them with what is relevant to your idea, where you would differ, and where you would further take them beyond. So there are methods like thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Thesis, what is their thesis? What is the main thesis? Who are the people speaking against them or reviewing critically against them? And what would be your synthesis between thesis and antithesis, and what is the position that you are taking in as either as a synthesis or beyond. And once you have done that, when identified there's a knowledge gap where they are inadequate and why your idea can go further, then you start working on the literature review. Not more than 3 4 books, just very close to your idea. Review them and highlight where you are taking your ideas beyond them and further than that, them, or even a major theoretical framework of what you call paradigm shift in somebody's book, how that can be relevant to your context. It would be good if primary writers and their ideas are engaged either in sequence or in an argument in a page or two at this level. So, to this level, this is very, very helpful. Literature review would help you to identify the knowledge gap and how you are going to push it beyond a pointer. You are not doing it yet. You will make it do it when you come with evidences. And also, you must be very careful at this stage not to plagiarize, not to copy. This is very important, whether it is in a proposal or anywhere in your dissertation. Very careful about copying somebody's idea without referring to them. It's important that you refer them at every stage. And there are universities have stringent rules about using the quotations quite often in one page. So please read the plagiarism documents of your university. So we have done the one sentence, we have done a summary, we have done the research questions, and we have done a little bit of what you call literature review. Then comes the next question is, now I have identified the knowledge gap. I am trying to claim that I am going to find something new. This is what I am trying to going to find. I have not found yet, but I will do the research and identify the evidence, prove the point. But this is what is called hypothesis. A hypothesis is a statement that a researcher makes in order to test or collect evidence against it or in favor of it, in order to prove that this statement is new, true, evidential, relevant, and to be tested in the thesis. One can also write down 3 objectives of the research. First objective is to identify what is to find something new. Second can be what tools and methods, approaches that one will be using in order to argue that this is new. Third can be how this new contributes to the ongoing discussions in the field of research. So, the 3 questions, first objective is to highlight what is new, what is that you claim to be new, and what kind of tools and methods that you are going to use in order to prove or make provide evidence, collect evidence, and interpret to make sure this new is proved as new. And then how this contributes, you have to highlight when you identify the knowledge gap, that knowledge gap is addressed by this new thinking or new idea that you are proposing as something new, how that is going to contribute in line of the knowledge gap that you have developed through the literature review. And then methodology. We have to, this is why the second question of tools and methods. Methodology is not simply what is the method, why are you using method. The methodology is the logic behind the method. What is the reason that you are using this method and not another method? What are the means or tools or technique that you are using to collect, analyze, interpret the evidences in order to produce supporting hypothesis and thus to prove your main statement or hypothesis? There is logic for using these methods in your research. For example, if you use questionnaire, you are using more quantitative analysis or even interview. There are people there we sometimes convert a questionnaire into numbers and quantify the people and do the survey in a large number And then there are representative samples from where the questionnaires are collected. And then you try to prove that these many people think that way using different variables. You contrast one against them and come up with a graph to identify hypothesis in each state. Finally, those things, those hypotheses will support your final hypothesis. That's the quantifying. That's we consider people in numbers. We consider people in terms of their answers. We provide options. They from the options we interpret it. Whereas in the qualitative analysis, we do consider people as interpreters. That method has a philosophy behind it. Interpretive method consider people as interpreters, those who can construct their world. Whereas in the quantifying, people consider things as they are. So there are philosophical difference of using these methods that you need to be aware of and put it in a simple sentence. I will talk about it later at one stage in the methodology. But the methodology means just highlight what are the tools or methods that you use in order to investigate or find out how you develop the evidences to support your arguments and your contribution as something new. And there is a philosophy of using this method which is distinct from using any other methods. And what is the simple principle or theoretical thinking behind that method? There are plenty of books, articles online, and otherwise. They will tell you if you are using focus group interview, there are kind of logic behind those methods. The people will say if you read a few of them, you will start understanding. You need to articulate it in your methodology. That is where people begin to realize that you are really understanding the principles of research. And then you do your ethical considerations. If your research involves a risk for others or for you, you need to highlight them in the proposal itself. And if your research involves children, you must clearly point out how the children are studied in the presence of their parents or guardians, how the ethical issues are raised and addressed in your research are important questions to be answered. So if there are risks, then you say what are the things that you keep in place in order to reduce the risks. And there are many things in this kind of ethical consideration which your university will give you guidelines and go through them. Make sure that you are also addressing that in your proposal. Then you have a title. In this title, now it's time to think about two, three titles. Just write them down. Identify pros and cons for each title and then select one. Possibly you can discuss with your friends who either did research or have done proposal stage that they might work with you in shaping a title. A title should be both interesting and encouraging the people to catch your research idea immediately. It cannot be a long one, rather a short but a persuasive one, persuading or creating an interest for the readers to look further into your research. If you wish to consider a longer explanatory title, then you'll have to discuss with your supervisor as a subtitle of your research. Your title can be a tentative one. You will be able to revise until the proposal is being accepted by the panel. So you also need to now highlight significance of this research. After these sections, you may consider why your research is important, or in other words, what is the significance of your research and conclusion to your context. So then you can also give a chapter outline. You may consider including a chapter titles with the clear numbers and with a timeline to complete the chapters and also the whole thesis or dissertation. The timeline and the chapter titles can be flexible in terms of changes that you may make to them when you write the chapters. Then finally, you give a bibliography. At the end, you need to include a short list of bibliography that you may consider doing a few sentences about each primary book that you include, stating why they are important to your research. That's called annotated bibliography. It is usually easy to follow one or the other system of Harvard or another system. in referencing, stick to one, doing a bibliography. I hope this writing or proposal is helpful to you. But there are some checks. Please make sure the pages are numbered properly. You should use a single referencing system suggested by the university you agreed with your supervisor and follow it throughout proposal consistently. The proposal should be proofread and edited in terms of language. You need to include a content page for proposal. Your titles for sections should be clear and easy to follow types. I hope by this time you would have understood what is the proposal and how to write a proposal. And I hope this is helpful. If you find it helpful, just leave a comment and subscribe. Thank you.